everyone.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Dr. Rachel Weiner, and I'm here to talk about the importance of being Batman. And the subtitle is actually Superhero Allegory in Therapy. And you may be intrigued by this title. It's meant to be intriguing, and it's meant to also be a little bit fun, because I firmly believe that therapy can be fun, and therapy is about the imagination of the people in the room. But also, more importantly, therapy is about you. So therapy is about the person coming for therapy and about the interaction and the relationship. So I work with what people bring me and not with what people don't bring me. And the inspiration or the background for this talk is that I was noticing, I was at a social function and I noticed that somehow I knew a lot about Batman. I think the topic came up and I thought, well, I started talking about different franchises and story arcs and interpretations of Batman. Well, that would be right in the Frank Miller universe, but in the Justice League Unlimited. And I thought, how did my mind get populated by all of these ideas about superheroes? And there's one reason and one reason alone, and that is that my patients, my clients, bring in sometimes lots of different interests and really metaphors, and there are a lot of different reasons people will talk about superheroes or games or TV shows. Sometimes it's just simply a way of helping me get to know them, and other times it's it's when it gets kind of difficult to talk about problems. So therapy is not only about problems. Therapy is about your interests. Therapy is about your skills, your desires, what you want, not just what's wrong with you, but also what's right with you. So I think Batman appeals to a lot of people because Batman has so many strengths. And Batman leverages a lot of his strengths against weaknesses. I do a lot of work with young people on the autism spectrum, and so very often their interests kind of populate my mind. That's the best way to say, because it's a great way to know people, to learn about their interests and their hobbies. And sometimes we won't talk about what's going on at home or at school, but we'll talk extensively, you're nodding your head, we'll talk extensively about what show they just saw and why it's important to them. And the why it's important to them is sometimes a clue as to kind of symbolically what's going on or what they pay attention to. So without further delay, we know, I'm guessing that if you came to this talk, you're pretty much Batman proficient. So you know the different comic versions of Batman, the film, come on in. The film versions of Batman, you may know a little bit. But I wanted to show you really my introduction to Batman. We're really used to this sort of brooding, Caped Crusader, dark, kind of strong, imposing figure. And so, naturally, the Batman that I was exposed to, my gateway Batman, was quite, thank you for laughing, was quite different. I don't know how many of you will recognize this Batman. Holy sardine. The shark repellent bat spray. So, Batman, among other things, is fun. The Adam West Batman was, my first introduction as a child. It was in syndication. I'm not that old. It was in syndication already. But, these themes that we come to recognize as, like, exclusively Batman, thinking ahead down to the most minute detail of what he's going to need in order to survive and do his job. And he's got his shark repellent bat spray. It's still very much similar to the darker versions of the Dark Knight, the Christopher Nolan trilogy and the Michael Keaton interpretation. But it is silly, and in the 1960s, of course, we had wars going on and a big peace movement, and nobody really wanted to show you even something remotely looking like punching a very obviously rubber shark to get him off Batman's leg. So he's sort of slapstick and slapping him. And what do you see when he makes contact with a villain, when he punches a villain? Pow! You don't see the violence, as opposed to some of the later current Batman, you certainly do see the violence. But what I really wanted to emphasize is that thinking ahead and having shark repellent bat spray is not unlike what the Batman we've come to know in our current era has. So one thing that's also very true to all interpretations of Batman is his utility belt. And what does he have in his utility belt? He has little grenades, he has smoke capsules, he has no tooth floss, dental floss, but he has a Batline reel, cameras, should the need arise, he's got everything. And does anybody remember what happens when Batman gets his utility belt taken away? What happens? Is anybody familiar with that? Does he become weaker? No? Nobody wants to. So Batman actually, all of the things that Batman is, all of the things he does, he trains for the eventuality of having to protect himself and fight crime at all possible moments. He's super prepared, and a Boy Scout, if ever there was one, in that be prepared sense anyway. His utility belt is actually up here. So all of the training that he does, all of the resources that he has are up here, and he figures out a contingency plan or a backup plan in case his utility belt isn't working or somebody takes it away from him. In fact, I think there are a couple of storylines where Scarecrow or Mr. Freeze or one of his many villains takes away his utility belt and he goes and hides in the safe, So that's one of the things. I think the utility belt is a great therapy metaphor, because what do we try to do and offer people in treatment? We try to give them tools and think of them as toolbox, giving them a toolbox. So what do you do when you can predict that you're going to have this situation that's going to be either unpleasant or difficult, or there's going to be conflict. It's not exactly Batman material, but with the holidays coming up, a lot of people are concerned about sort of long-standing conflicts in their families. And so how do I deal with this difficult relative or uncle so-and-so or aunt so-and-so who drinks a little too much, and those kinds of things. So we teach people different skills in terms of things to say when somebody says something that hurts their feelings. You can consider those all part of our utility belt in therapy. When I say therapy, I'm really talking about any kind of counseling, any kind of endeavor where there's a client and then a helper. I'm using the term very broadly. I am a psychologist, but I work a lot with teachers, and I'm also an educator. So I work a lot with counselors and different types of coaches, and so doing a lot of collaborative work. So therapy, I use anything that's intended to be therapeutic and help the person get as strong as possible. So on from the utility belt, I'm going to show you a couple of different examples of the same kind of characteristic of Batman in his ability to plan ahead. And so he also, in the comic versions, he does things like this. He will, I don't know if you can see this. Why is he all in yellow? Because his nemesis, Green Lantern, is somehow disabled, or he loses his powers with the color yellow. So I love this slide. This comes from one of the animated arcs. I think it's Frank Miller, maybe. but he's drinking lemonade. He goes so far as to paint the room yellow. He has an all yellow suit, and he is drinking lemonade. I love this. And Green Lantern is not very happy about it. But one of the many ways that he plans ahead. And so obviously the people we work with, or you yourselves, we're not talking about, how to defeat an enemy or, using extreme measures, but sometimes actually our measures can be very extreme. But we try to help people anticipate what might be problems for them. I think the closest thing to this sort of a scenario that I've been in, the kind of conversation that I've had recently, is working with a young man on the autism spectrum who he gets sick a lot. He gets upper respiratory infections and stomach problems. And he said to me one day, what should be in my medicine cabinet? I love that question. He's just starting to live independently. And so helping people plan ahead is very important, of course. And so this is not exactly like, we can think of Green Lantern as a virus. Of course, I'm not being very literal here, I'm speaking metaphorically. So all of these neat gadgets that he has, of course, that's the way that we draw people in and get them interested in a story about somebody who uses all of the different gadgets and the different technology that are within his grasp, within the cutting edge of technology, and he's very creative. But I think another really important part about the Batman legacy or the Batman mythology is that he's someone with a lot of trauma and a lot of pain. But he's not an alien from out of space. He's not another species. Bruce Wayne is a person. And though it's not very common that this happens, it's certainly not a freak thing that happens. His parents get murdered in front of him, and he as a child carries around that memory, and he carries around into adulthood. And so when you think about what trauma is just an intrusion of the past into the present. And Batman lives with a lot of trauma. And so what does he do with that trauma? He takes all of his suffering and he converts that into really wanting to be the very best person he can be, wanting to be agile, wanting to make the world a safer place for himself and for other people. He converts that into compassion for others, and I'm going to show you a clip in a little while of his compassionate side, his humanity, and the way that he helps even one of his former nemesis. It's very, very touching. So he's a very appealing character, I think, because he's the most human, even if you subtract his vast wealth and these ridiculously long odds that he overcomes. He doesn't actually have superpowers other than his native intelligence and his constant working on himself. Actually, since I alluded to it, I wanted to talk about his courage also. And there's this one clip from Batman Begins where he and Alfred, the butler, are talking. He's a very little boy, and he's talking not only about how he's afraid, but how he really feels it's his fault. And then you see him through the years grow up, and he's training with, at this time, Ra's al Ghul is his mentor. I don't want to give it away if you haven't seen it, but he learns to overcome by training. So I want to show you this clip because I think it's really important.
I thought I might prepare a little supper.
Large, we'll screen it.
Very well.
Alfred,
Yes, boss.
it was my fault. I made the leap.
No.
If I hadn't gotten escaped,
It was nothing that you did. It was him. I thought I might prepare a little supper. Do you understand?
I'd be so what?
So do I, Master. Yes, boss.
It was my fault. I made the leap.
No.
If I hadn't gotten escaped.
It was not your choice. My anger outweighs my guilt.
My anger outweighs my guilt.
You understand?
You have learned to bury your guilt with anger. I will teach you to confront it and to face the truth. You know how to fight 6 men. We can teach you how to engage 600.
Responsible for your parents.
You know how to disappear. We can teach you to become truly invisible.
Invisible.
Happy! You have learned to bury your guilt with anger. I will teach you to confront it and to face the truth.
Bit of a deja vu, sorry about
You
that.
know how to fight 6 men. We can teach you how to engage 600. You know how to disappear. We can teach you to become truly invisible.
Invisible.
Happy!
So you see, I think this is a critical piece of the Batman story that is probably a great analogy for therapy. Teaching people to use some of their negative emotion, though not necessarily in sword fighting or defeating 600 men, but rather in really acknowledging the feelings that they do have and converting those feelings into something constructive, whether that is, resiliency in tough situations, or when they have to stand up for themselves, self-advocacy, any number of things. You could probably add to the list because I see so much nodding. I think I'm in with a bunch of colleagues. So we'll have a chance to visit a little bit afterward and share some of those stories. So I think actually Batman is quite a great metaphor for not only therapy, but also for the skills that a patient can acquire with therapy. Since I mentioned it before, I did want to show you this example of Batman's humanity. And this comes from Justice League Unlimited, from the Batman animated series. And in this sequence, he finds out that one of the villains, Ace, is terminally ill and has very little time left. And you'll see what he does. It's quite touching.
Just click it once, pause it,
Pause it.
and then click on the grades.
See, all a bunch of teachers. I figured you out.
Click on the gray area outside the video.
Ah,
Double click. There you go.
okay. Ah.
Batman,
Ace.
did you like playing with my new Royal Flush gang?
Can't say that I did.
Yeah, they aren't any fun at all. I gave them their powers and they still hardly ever play with me.
Can't imagine why.
When I was little, Cadmus used to make me play all kinds of games, but they weren't any fun either. They'd strap me into their machines and poke wires into my brain. Ace, can you move this object with your mind? Yeah, I can move it. They weren't really games, you know. They were training me, turning me into a weapon for justice, they said. They got their weapon. I got cheated out of my childhood.
I know what that's like.
You do, don't you? You don't have to answer. I read your mind. That's how I knew you weren't going to use Mrs. Waller's weapon on me.
No, I wasn't.
You were going to try and talk me into fixing what I've changed. Before I die.
Yes.
I'm dying very soon.
Yes. I'm sorry.
Would you stay with me? I'm scared.
So as you can see, Batman, she makes reference to his childhood. Of course, she can read his mind. That's a device so that we don't have to hear the whole story, have that exposition again. But his childhood brings a certain amount of pain, and he meets that little girl, or that very powerful little girl, with his pain. His pain meets her pain. And so he can be very effective at also being very compassionate. This is another virtue of Batman's that I, like to. It depends on the interpretation of Batman, because in the Christopher Nolan trilogy we see him kind of walking a line and not saving one of his villains, but not killing him, because we have a code. Batman doesn't use guns, Batman doesn't kill, but in other interpretations he doesn't save his rivals, but most of them he does. Most of the the lore, this dating back into the 40s, I think, although it's supposed to take place in the 20s. So mostly he is someone who is notorious for, a superhero who's notorious for helping even his villains or people who try to kill or disarm him. He's a bit different from Superman, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
So he's not as black and white and kind of reflexively good. Because he's got all of this anger and all of this sadness, I think sometimes it occurs to him to do some things that are not as constructive. And I think that may be also why he's more three-dimensional, more appealing. But actually one of the young men I work with this week, one of the patients I work with, brought up something interesting about Batman as opposed to Superman. Superman actually thinks of himself as Clark Kent, so his identity is as Clark Kent, whereas Bruce Wayne is always thinking of himself as the Batman. So he really thoroughly embraces this task of being the very best he can be, of leveraging all of his strengths against his limitations, and of making the world a safer place. And I think in that way, I think he's in my mind anyway, he's a preferable superhero to some of the other superheroes, because he's more human in that way and more relatable. There's one more clip that I wanted to show, and this is actually very touching. I don't know if you remember the scene also from, I think it's Batman Begins, where he climbs out of a hole. Do you remember this? And this gets repeated a lot in the movie, the more recent movie trilogy, where the question, why do we fall, is answered. Do you remember the answer to why do we fall? So we can get back up, or we can learn to get back up, or it's not word for word, I'm paraphrasing. But this is very powerful also because there are other people cheering him on, and Batman does not work solely in isolation. Sometimes he has difficulty with connection with other people because he is so off the charts brilliant and also very wealthy, but he always has a Fox or Alfred or Robin. He always finds connection with other people, and that is a source of his strength. I really love this clip very much. Let me see if I can learn from my previous mistake. Pause, gray,
Double click.
double click, and voila, Bob's your uncle.
Do not fear death. I think this makes you strong. Makes you weak. How can you move faster than possible? Fight longer than possible? Without the most powerful impulse of the spirit. The fear of death. I feel dying here. I see it, guys. It's not what I see. Then I decline. As the child did. Without the Lord, then fear will find you again. Supplies for your journey. Oh, that's wonderful.
see in that clip, it's not so very far-fetched. It's kind of on the surface. Batman rises, he's got encouragement from the other, I think the other prisoners in this case, but he also can't do it without other people. He can't do it without encouragement. And you also see at that shot, just I think those men's faces are so wonderful, so expressive. You see that Batman truly is an inspiration to other people. And I think in that shot, but he didn't do anything by himself in that particular scene. And if you think about all along the way who has helped him, he's not really done very much by himself at all. And neither did I do this presentation by myself. I had a lot of input from people who are who have better expertise than I. Just make that up right now. My friends Matt and John and Mary Beth, who's right here, and Javier, and then two very special people in my life, Ryan and David, who've given me some input into how to communicate Batman as a really good metaphor for therapy. And I figured that the last part of this presentation could be us having a conversation, don't get scared. I do have somewhere, I have some Batman masks in exchange for your sharing with the rest of us your favorite Batman moments or your favorite thing about Batman. Does anybody want to? Okay, great. What's your name?
Latoya.
Latoya?
Yeah.
Could you stand up?
Okay.
Please.
My husband's really into Batman, so recently, I'm sure all of you know the new show Gotham that's just started. So I'm really into Gotham, and of course I don't know the whole story like my husband does, but I'm really enjoying seeing Bruce as a little boy. I haven't made it to the next. I don't think he's an adult yet. So far, it's about the third season or third episode or whatever. But I just enjoy his interaction with Cat, the little Catwoman girl. So just their interaction with each other, or her, the way she looks over him. They haven't met each other yet, but just the way she looks over him, and was it the Commissioner, Gordon? He's not Commissioner yet, okay. But the care that he takes in checking on Bruce with his butler.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Latoya. Yes, what's your name?
Carmen.
Carmen.
So like you mentioned before, he doesn't really do too much of it alone. Like he has the commissioner's help. He and the idea of like the bat signal and how he like asks the city to help him help them. If that makes any sense.
Right.
So that idea of like this mutual kind of support. I just really like that about that's him.
Thank you. Yes. What's your name?
Audra.
Audra.
Nice to meet you. Thank you. My favorite thing about Batman is what, like you said earlier, about the compassion. I really like how he doesn't, like he has Joker in the last one, where he has the Joker where he could easily drop him. The Joker wants him to drop him so bad, and he knows that Batman has that compassion. He kind of criticizes him on having that compassion and says that's what makes you weak. But on the contrary, it's what makes him strong.
That's a great point.
A lot of other superheroes don't go the distance into not wanting to hurt the villains, and so I really do like that aspect. And I in the back of my head, like I always saw that, but whenever you pointed it out, it really kind of helped really point that out among other superheroes, because I personally like Superman, but I like Batman. I love the Batman movies, and I'm really interested in watching that show too. It looks really fun. And the main character, he was in the OC, and I really like the OC too. And so it'll be interesting
That's
to
going to
see
be
him.
my next talk on the OC.
It's different. He's a different character, so it's going to be good to see him in a different type of role and stuff.
Did everybody hear Everybody hear everything? I'm assuming so, because I hear. And it's kind of a small room with good acoustics, so that's a great point. So Batman's compassion, sense of community, and then his backstory. We have a refreshing kind of new look at Batman before Batman begins. Anybody else? What's your name?
My name's Robert.
Hi,
Thank you.
Robert.
Hi. I guess my favorite part about Batman is, despite all the naysayers, despite everything else that's going around him, the city can be against him, he always follows his conscience. He always does what he believes to be the right thing to do. He's very compassionate. And that's really important that he believes what he's doing wholeheartedly, 100%, to be the best, not only for him, but for everyone around.
That's a great point. I'm not going to ask anybody if you heard him, because you speak very well and project very in the back of the room. Anybody else? I have more masks, and they're not going to give themselves away. You can also stay after and tell me individually. Yes?
My name is Cordell.
What's your name?
Cordell.
Cordell. Here's a mask for you. What's your favorite thing about Batman? Or your favorite Batman moment? What do you like about Batman?
I just would, well, he likes different types of shows, but I thought to come in here, I don't really know that much about Batman, but I thought to come in here, maybe I can help him to find another show to like.
Okay.
So this is kind of helpful. I made it interesting, so I like looking into the Batman for him.
Good.
That's
Well,
why I tuned in.
Cordell, what's your favorite moment with anything about Batman at all?
What's your favorite moment, Cordell?
Is it something he does or something he says? Something he wears?
Or do you like that he saves people?
He saves people.
And Mom saves the day. Thank you, Cordell. Welcome. Awesome. Anybody else?
My name is Berta, and
Berta?
yes,
Hi, Berta.
hi. And it's not necessarily, well, I guess it has to do with Batman, but the scene that you showed about him climbing out of the hole. But before that, they had like a whole explanation with the rope around him and how. I'm sure Batman has fear, but he just seems so courageous and fearless to do what he's able to do. But with that rope, it kind of like, you still have that doubt in your mind, so you're like, well, I'm going to fail, so I'm going to have this rope around me. So once he removed it, he like succeeded.
Right.
So that's what I liked about it, just facing the fear and just like removing the barriers and just go for it.
Right. That's a great point. And I think one of the things about that, not just that scene, but that film, that particular film, is that they do focus on some of his fears and the method by which he overcomes his fears. And that's very poignant. Thank you. Yes. What's your name?
My name is Luann.
Luann.
I think the most intriguing thing is the fact that he's the only superhero without a superpower.
Yeah.
Thank you. And that he has such a variety of assailants. And like you said, he has to come from within himself to have his own powers to overcome.
Right. Right. That's great. That's one of the things I like about him too. I have 2 more masks, but we can still talk even if you don't want a mask. Anybody want a mask? Because I know Mary Beth really does.
I'd
What's
just
your
like
name?
to
Sorry.
say, Donna Marshall. I'd just like
nice to
to
meet
say
you.
that I think that it's a wonderful idea to choose something from popular culture that people can relate to. I don't know if you've read the article about a dad from Harvard who has a son with autism, and he related to him through Disney characters. It's on the Huffington Press, on the internet. That's where I saw it. Anyway, he wrote a book as well, but just to have something that people can really relate to, and people really do relate to popular culture now much more than Ulysses and all the things that you know. So I think that it's just brilliant of you to do this and to
Thank you. Thank you.
I think that I'd love to see this done more. I mean, I work with young children who really probably are not allowed to watch Batman, but you know, the Disney characters are the same type of
Right.
theory, I think is a great idea.
Well, thank you so much. That's such good feedback. And for any of you who I know that you work with, either within your own family or in the community, you work with constituents, clients, patients who also have some struggles. And a way to really connect with them is simply, and I think you all know this pretty well, is to take an interest and gain some proficiency in their interests. I can't tell you the number of times I hear parents say to me, well, he just plays video games and I don't know what to talk to him about. And I say, well, play those video games with him. But they're just, one-person shooter games. Well, you can still find a way to be in the room with him and be excited about, about his performance in the game and ask him questions and learn it yourself. So I think that was my intention, and it sort of happened naturally. I realized I was Batman adjacent for a long time, or like Batman was Disney adjacent for so long. And it isn't about going out and trying to get a job with DC Comics. I hadn't thought about that. But it's really about learning whatever the interests of whomever comes to see me might be, whether or not it's something I ever knew anything about.
That's what I wanted to ask you is what initiated that correlation between your therapeutic services and Batman, and how long have you been growing in that area?
Well, I've been a psychologist in practice since 2002. I graduated then, I got my license in 2005, but in the interim working in the schools. And I think I've always been interested in people and what they're interested in, so I can't even say how far back that dates, because I have a repository of everybody else's interpretation of knowledge, first and second hand. But the idea for this particular talk really didn't cross my mind until a couple months ago when I was at a social function, and I realized somebody started talking about superheroes. And I said, well, it does depend on the arc with Batman, because and I'm realizing, I'm like, is this me? I really wasn't somebody who grew up, I did like Wonder Woman, but I didn't, get so immersed in it. And I realized that I do end up, not just with one or two people, but several people have conversations that they bring in about their favorite superhero, their favorite television show, and there's always a reason why. Sometimes it is as lighthearted as just getting to know people, but I do think that all of these themes, his valor, his compassion, his humanity, his ingenuity, and then ultimately his transcendence are so good for people who are trying to not just fix what's wrong with them, but truly to become as good as they can be, as strong as they can be, and as resilient and proficient in their lives.
I applaud it. It's fascinating.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Yes, what's your name?
Stacy.
Stacy.
I kind of found interesting. Is actually with the mask, because I know with my daughter, she does not like to speak in front of people, but once you put the mask, any kind of mask on her, she feels like nobody can see her. So she's able to talk more, and so I find that kind of relation there. That's pretty interesting.
That's real. Thank you for sharing that, because that also brings up the point of noticing, observing people's interests and figuring out how that might correspond to a way of working with them to be the very best they can be. And in your case, your daughter, it may be that, figuratively, that mask, she may find drama or theater to be appealing, or comedy, because it is wearing a mask. So it may be a literal mask, or it may just be something that she...
As long as it covers her, because she does not like to talk in front of people. It kind of scares her. But once she has that on, she's like, okay, well, they can't see my face.
Right.
So I can talk now.
That's interesting.
How old is she? If you don't mind
She's
me asking?
9.
Okay. Very interesting. Bring her a mask.
There you go.
You don't want to encourage that. I have one more mask And I mean, I'll just put it on if.
There you go.
Thank you all so much. You really are just wonderful in contributing to this talk. I learned a lot from you too, which is awesome. I have my business cards up here and I'll hang out for a little while, and I don't know if you are going to another session, but I'd love to visit with you, anybody who wants to stay behind. So thanks so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.